Hello, my name is Johan Lambrix. I am coordinator of the team education of the Provincial Nature Centre, and in this video, me and my colleagues will explain how we are greening school grounds in our province. But first, maybe show you how a school ground or the most school grounds in Limburg look like, and it is primary school Ondersteboven in Leopoldsburg in our province. You're looking at the situation in 2021. It was like a lot of school grounds in our province, very concrete, dull, boring, grey school ground. But if we go to 2024, the same school ground looks like this. And this is our goal, to make every school ground in Limburg a green school ground, or at least making green school grounds the norm in our province and not the exception. And first I have to explain a little bit about the Provincial Nature Centrum, and the best way is to do this with explaining our baseline. Only this baseline, natuurlijk verbonden in Dutch, is hard to translate or maybe impossible to translate in English. That's why I try to do it in two ways. First way is, of course, we are connected, is a possible way to translate our baseline, meaning that yes, we need to connect. And the second way of translating is we are connected by nature. It's very important that we are connected, but also the nature part is an important part of our baseline. And at the Provincial Nature Centrum we try to connect in three ways, in three different ways. First way is we try to connect persons to persons. We try to create networks, organize conferences where people can meet and learn from each other, other networking moments or teacher trainings. And our goal is to bring people together to learn from each other and to look for ways to collaborate in the future. And actually not losing all that energy and time in reinventing the wheel all over again. The second way of connecting is connecting nature to nature. And it is an important task of my colleagues Katrien and Joris, who will explain a bit later in this video how we try to do this in our greening school grounds projects. And connecting nature to nature means that we build corridors that species, plants and animals, can move from one habitat to the other. You know, Flanders is a very small and also densely populated country with a lot of roads in it and a lot of interruptions in those ecological corridors. A third way of connecting, and this is the main task of my team education, is connecting people with nature, and especially young children, young people with nature. Because we believe in the principle that connection with nature gives you the best chance of appreciating nature later on in life and caring for nature more later on in life. So it is very important that we can build up this connection with nature at a young age. And children spend a lot of time at a school. So greening the school grounds is a very good way to help children connect back to nature, because they are a lot of time in schools. And connecting to nature as well in the leisure time, free time, playing time, as in the learning time, because learning in and from nature is also very important in our greening projects. Then maybe time for a short history lesson in our Limburg province. What you are looking at now is the musical note sheet of what we can call the anthem of Limburg. And it's translated, the title is Limburg, My Native Country. And I will read out the very first sentence of this song. And it is where the nightingale sings in the bronze-green forest of oaks. A very prosaic, lyric way of showing our proud of our nature in our province. And a very nice fact is, this is a song written by a teacher in 1909, Gerard Krekelberg. Nice extra feature of this anthem of Limburg regarding school ground screening. Then we jump a little bit furthermore in time. 2002, first milestone, MOS was created. The next speaker in this video, Karel, will elaborate more about this project MOS and how we are helping schools greening their school ground by coaching. But when it was created, there were 5 main themes we helped school working on. It were sustainability themes. The first one was energy. We also had water management, water pollution, also traffic and mobility, sustainable mobility to and from schools, and also something about garbage, preventing garbage and reuse of materials, recycling. And the last and 5th theme was nature at school, and that was the first seed that was planted about school greening in our province. The second milestone, again 10 years further on, is when we wrote a first system of subsidies for schools, and we called it climate-related projects for MOS schools. But this system of subsidies was created in a broader narrative of climate neutrality, and that was a goal our provincial government has set for itself to reach by 2050. And an example of such a project we provided subsidies for is this solar-powered mobile phone charging house. Very difficult sentence to explain an accommodation the students built themselves, where they could charge their mobile devices through solar panels on the roof. And this was in the Don Bosco Secondary School in Houthalen in our province. But we noticed that already the majority of applications for these subsidies were about school greening. So we noticed the demand for more money to go to schools to green their school grounds. And then a third milestone, last in this short history lesson, is in 2018, when we created a new approach to school greening with 2 very important key features. The first one, again, we wrote a new system of subsidies, totally dedicated to school greening, in which we can provide every school €15,000 to green their school grounds. But the second part, maybe more important, of this new approach was a guidance and coaching by these 4 people, our MOS coaches. They do very important work to help schools to take the right steps towards greening. But again, Karel will explain more about this in the second part of this video. Okay, 5 years of school greening. Where are we at the moment? I give you 5 facts. First fact, at this moment 55 schools have ended the creation of a green play, learning and living environment with our help, both coaching from MOS and with the subsidies. And 40 other schools are in the process of greening. So hopefully in a couple of months' time we will reach the 100th school who has greened their school grounds in Limburg. Second fact is that we planted or helped schools planted 8,300 trees and shrubs. Those plants provide more biodiversity at schools, make ecological corridors or give some shade in the ever-warming climate we are experiencing now. Also, better water management is possible with more trees and shrubs at a school ground. And also the creative play and educational opportunities are very broad with more greenery in our school grounds. A third fact, we removed or helped remove 12,200 square meters of those grey concrete tiles, so that nature has more opportunities in a green school ground to again reduce heat, stress or tackle climate change. And then we come to the even more important figures. 1,800 teachers are now benefiting from a more pleasant workplace. And not only a pleasant workplace, but also an extension of their classroom to the outdoors. So they can have the students learning outside in and with nature for various domains, learning domains. And the last fact, where we're very proud of, 13,600 children and young people will have more opportunities for creative and risky play in a green environment. And they can also learn in that green environment with lots of nature surrounding them. So that's very important to have those children also enjoying the nature outdoors. And being able to make that connection to nature again. We also learned some things for the future. We learned a lot of things, but I will only elaborate on 3 things we've learned. First thing is we need to convince schools more to open up for the community. There's green school grounds. As I already mentioned, there is a lot of population and buildings in Flanders, so space is scarce, and it's important to make the best use of space wherever it is possible. And the colleagues from the Netherlands put it at a very nice way. They call the green school ground the neighbor's green living room. And it has a lot of benefits also involving the community. You can get some help by maintaining the school grounds, but there's also possible of social control. When they are involved, the natural space will be also their space, and they will look out for vandalism or prevent even vandalism at school grounds. So involving community, opening up for the community is something to work on for the future. Second lesson we learned by this silly picture of 2 school ground designs. On the one hand, it is green. On the other hand, Project 2 is also green, but you can notice a slight difference, I may say. It is just to point out that it's very important to have some professional designers involved. They know what plants to use, for what purpose, on what soil. So it's very important that schools will have some help, because it's not the knowledge that is already present in every school. And also we learned that when you have a designer in the whole process until the ending of the project, that will be the best chance of success. He can help children think about green school grounds and what they need in a green school grounds. He can make the plan with the right species for the right soil, and he can follow up on the execution, the build of a green school ground. And when this happens in all those stages, we see the best results happening. And a last lesson, of course, I have to mention risk and danger. It's a very important issue for our schools, so we have to listen also to teachers who are a bit doubtful about green school ground when it comes to risk and danger. And if we just keep banning all those things, and that is the main message, then maybe we will end up in a green school ground where this is happening. Children are not able to play anymore on a green school ground. So it's very important to open up the dialogue about risky play, giving children opportunities for risky play, to look up their own boundaries. What is possible? Can I climb this tree or log or boulder? It's important that children can learn this themselves. And you probably heard this quote before: don't be as safe as possible. Be as safe as necessary in a green school ground. So children will still have opportunity to learn about risky play. Okay, this was the first part of this video. My colleague Karel Koene will now talk about our way of helping and coaching schools to make their school grounds a green school ground.
Hi everyone, I'm Karel Koene. I'm part of the Provincial Nature Centre and MOS Limburg. And in this presentation, I'd like to tell you about our approach in supporting school greening. First of all, MOS is an acronym for Milieuzorg op school, meaning environmental care at school. And it's a program of the Flemish government, Brussels, and the 5 Flemish provinces. Now, in each province, 4 MOS coaches are locally anchored. In Limburg, in the Provincial Nature Centre. And Johan already explained you about our baseline, naturally connected. In 2022, we celebrated our 20th anniversary. The 20th anniversary of MOS, that is. And thus, I think I can say we are a stable and experienced partner for schools with environmental and educational expertise, but also expertise in process guiding and coaching. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about that. But first, one nice example of our connecting work. So for an action research project on locally relevant teaching, we connected a professor, Katrien van Poek, from the University of Ghent, with a very special school in Hasselt, Kindcentrum Straal. And this school had a question: how can we better attract wild animals to our school grounds? So what we did is provide the school with our customized biodiversity recommendation. As local MOS coaches, we identified matching curriculum goals, but also local resources. Resources, persons, places, organizations the school could use, could ask for help to further explore their question and, of course, to solve their problem, to give them answers. And Miss Laura here and her pupils, they took up one idea, amongst others, and that's a guided visit to the local nature reserve, which is called Tommelen. And as you can see, this is cattle pond area created by World War II bombing, actually, and also home of the great crested newt, so a very special little water dragon. And with this guided tour, students learned how to shape their own school grounds in favor of amphibians. And by the way, on the way, they also discovered this civilian gas mask from World War II. So it was a very nice experience for them. But that's for an appetizer, because I would like to tell you more about our way in supporting school greening. We have a guided subsidy. And for that guidance, we always start with an intake interview, and in which we explore what is the need, what is the question of the school, and what's our offer, and is there a match there? And the most important question that we always ask is there enough support base from the teacher staff, from the school team? That's very important for us. And then we offer a guided action plan, starting with clarifying the why of the school team. And this model here, the Noster model for managing change, can illustrate our whole school approach. So as I said, we offer a clear action plan to the school. We offer some resources, money with the subsidy, but also expertise. So these resources are often lacking in schools. We clarify the vision and the incentives of the school team. Why should that team, that specific school, why should they benefit? Or could they benefit from green school grounds? And we start with teaching teachers about nature-based learning and risky play. So we start supporting them and working on their skills as well. Time is also a precious resource in schools. So we are very cautious about minimizing administration for the schools and also minimizing the time we ask from the whole school team. For instance, by working with a little action group. That said, we think it's really important not to take over and to leave the initiative and the ownership with the school itself. So we start with the why, and I won't go into the various and research-based benefits of school greening, but I'd like to mention two. First, we already know very well that nature contact in childhood leads to environmental awareness. And in fact, that's our own biggest why. And two, and this is a newer insight, we seem to need bacteria from a biodiverse soil for our own health, even our mental health. So from the Children and Nature Network, I also learned that school greening can help minimizing the inequity, or can reduce the inequity there is in access to nature. So I was very proud when I got this picture here from the director of my local school, because they had on their playground some issues with bullying, with fighting, with boredom, conflicts. And they reacted to that by adding play challenge on the playground, for instance, with these building branches. And we can see here that these pupils are very proud of what they made. They work together. So for me, this is a nice illustration of how loose parts can serve for social and creative play. So in this vision session, I like to play a little game with the teachers, and that's this nature memory bingo. And I really like to do this because it makes them feel, not know, but really feel the importance of nature contact in childhood. This game brings them a little bit back to their own childhood. It also makes them feel how fun it is to go outside and move and do like a social activity. And also, in my experience, it helps to go out and move the body to also get the mind's move as well. So this session then should result in this kind of word cloud with a summary of the most important reasons for school greening from that specific school, that specific team. And this word cloud should feed into a little text, a little vision statement. And we really express the importance of having this vision statement because it's important to fall back on when making design choices, when prioritizing, but also when doubt kicks in. For instance, after school greening, when first little learning injuries occur or when children get dirty clothes and some parents come to complain, it's really important that the school can say, okay, but we really thought about the advantages and they are really bigger than these little accidents or so the balance remains positive and we stay the course. And to conclude this part of the why, after 4 or 5 years of supporting school greening, we did our first little survey and 187 teachers responded. And it was very nice for us to see that perception of positive effects on school grounds were there. And most positively perceived effects were about nature contact, about play challenge, and about physical exercise. So, good feedback. Okay, so second step in the action plan is to sensitize teachers about nature-based learning. Because for us, nature is a very nice learning environment. It's dynamic. It offers lots of learning chances. It fascinates children by nature. So outside learning can be more dynamic, offers chances, can be more dynamic than classic classroom teaching, with powerful learning due to feedback. Because outside, and with more dynamic activities, students can get feedback from each other. We can call this social learning. They can get feedback from their teacher. And there it's very important that as a teacher you appreciate all kinds of talents with your students. And they could also get direct feedback from the environment. They try something risky and they get hurt, for example. That's really good feedback and they learn. It's a very strong learning experience. So these dynamics can also create opportunities to develop social, emotional, and other skills. And I think maybe we should work more on skills than just knowledge. And concerning skills, I'd like to invite you to check out Laura Jana's key skills, but also this little video of the World Economic Forum. It's about which 5 future skills the biggest employers today see. And I can tell you that 4 out of 5 skills, in my opinion, can be better achieved outside than indoors. So there's a future for outdoor learning. There's a big future. About teacher training, before the actual greening in the design process, we tend to sensitize teachers about possibilities and like to inspire them about what can happen. After school greening, we want to help teachers grow in nature-based learning. We want to inspire both the pioneers. We want to empower both pioneers as beginners. And how do we do that? By confirming them, by giving new impulses, by bringing them together, by giving teacher trainings for individuals as well as for school teams. We prefer giving teacher training in a learning path where we combine inspiration, coaching, but also peer learning. By the way, teachers always ask for this inspiration, and I think by that they mean specific and practical teaching ideas that they can adjust for their own use. We think it's important not to stay with inspiration, but to evolve from informing and inspiring to coaching. And concerning coaching, I'd like to point out this Heron model on intervention styles, because it really helped me a lot in finding the balance and choosing the balance between being an expert and being like more informative and directive, and when to be a coach. When does your teacher or your school needs you to be a coach and needs you to be supportive or asking good questions to help them grow. Then, third and final step in that action plan for the design process is making a participatory wish list. We really stimulate schools to involve parents and local government for all kinds of support, all kinds of extra resources, but even more important is to involve students and to give the children a voice, a saying in what they need, what they want for their playgrounds. Some pointers there are to help teachers make that wish list from the previous exercises, starting from the vision statement and the educational needs they thought about, and also not to have them list very specific elements, but have them list more like functions, for instance, construction play or rest or shadow. And for pupils, we noticed that it's often needed that we give them some ideas, some examples of what a green schoolyard can be, because often they don't know it and they cannot really think about it unless, for example, we give them a nice experience in a nature-based play environment. So that concludes a brief presentation of our action plan in guiding school greening and the teacher training around it. One other asset of MOS I'd like to mention is I think we're helping schools in providing them kind of applied frameworks. One example here is the SDG impact rows, and you can find this on our website sdgs@school.be. And with this SDG impact rows, schools can scan a project, a lesson on its SDG impact, and more importantly, they can spot missed opportunities to affect positively even more SDGs. So for instance, you can also make this exercise about school greening. So with this guided subsidy, we have been investing the last 5 years lots of money and most of our time. But I think we have been investing in like a new target group, a target group of schools that have the green infrastructure. But I think there's lots more work to be done in order for schools to maintain that green infrastructure. And I'm talking about dealing with play erosion, I'm talking about maintenance and about ecological management and how to involve children in that, how to make that feasible, also financially. And of course, I think there's lots of work to be done in helping schools really getting everything out of their green playgrounds in terms of nature-based learning and in terms of free play, risky play, and really enjoying nature. So, thank you for re-watching, re-listening our little contribution about our way of work in the conference, Natural Way Forward. I hope You can learn something from it, and I'm convinced that we can learn lots more from each other and we can work together. So I hope we can do that in the future. So, hope to see you again.
Welcome to this presentation on biodiversity as an essential part of school greening. If you watch this presentation, you're probably already convinced of the fact that enhancing biodiversity is essential when greening school grounds. Basically, it's just a question of looking for a win-win situation. Let's take a look at our starting point for school greening. We could make it easy and consider a school ground as an isolated island, but of course, it's not. Nearby many school grounds, we find natural biotopes and species that give us a lot of information about what can be done for nature and biodiversity on a school playground. By keeping that in mind, we support both biodiversity and educational goals, since biodiversity can also be looked at from an educational point of view. Let's take a closer look at these surroundings. We distinguish three types of locations. School can be located in an urban area. In other cases, the school can be located more nearby a biotope of high natural value. And in our surroundings, even can a school be part of an ecological corridor? That's our third possibility. Let's take a closer look at these types of locations. This map shows the first case, where the school is located in an urbanized area. There's no biotope of high ecological value in its surroundings. So in this case, we advise the school to generate basic biodiversity on the school ground, which supports more common species. Mostly this means creating some sunny areas, but it can also be creating shadow, food, water, and hiding places for small species. General things we want schools to keep in mind is, for instance, to maintain as much as possible vegetation that is already growing naturally and choose indigenous plants. Moreover, they better not maintain too intensively. For instance, not mow the grass too often. These small adjustments can already improve biodiversity in this urban area. Let's take a look at the second case. This school was located in a short distance from some forests, in this case oak pine forests, with heath and heathy grassland. To enhance the species occurring in this biotope, we advise the school to support species that are found in the border of the nearby forest, and to avoid using non-native plants with invasive behavior. Otherwise, these invasive plants may spread to the valuable biotope, and that's of course not what we want. In addition, we recommend it not to transform the existing grassland into a flower meadow just by cultivating and seeding, but more by mowing the grassland extensively. That way, the existing grassland will gradually transform into a biodiverse one, with species that already occur naturally there. In our third category, we have this school located between two areas with biotopes of high ecological value. You can see them yellow striped on the map. Both areas are protected by European and Flemish law. One of them, as you can see in the picture, contains hundreds of ponds that were created by prom creators and that inhabit a population of crested newts. If we look at the blue line between those areas, we know there are possibilities to establish an ecological corridor between them. More specifically, the blue color from the line indicates it should be a corridor for animals that make use of pools and ponds, like, of course, amphibians. Since the location of the blue line is just an indication, we also know that the connection can be made close to the location of the school that's a little bit higher from the blue line. So we advise the school to plan their school greening in favor of some of these European protected amphibians, like alpine newts, small newts, tree frogs, crested newts, but also a lot of insects like dragonflies. If the school uses a pool or a pond with a lot of vegetation, this would already help these species a lot. Grassland with a lot of flowers provides enough insects for them to feed on. And of course, it would be wonderful and useful for educational goals to see this school becoming a stepping stone for these endangered species. Now let's take a closer look at these ecological corridors. Ecological corridors as such might not be so special, but combining them with the greening of school grounds is a kind of unique approach. Now, why are ecological corridors so important? In our surroundings, hard surfaces doubled within 25 years, and the population density of our surroundings is more than 350 persons per square kilometer. You can imagine what that creates to nature. We get isolated, small nature reserves, which are a problem for the stability of populations of species. So what can we do about that? We can create ecological corridors between these smaller nature reserves. And in Belgium, the creation of these corridors is the responsibility of provinces. That's why we, as Provincial Nature Centre, try to take care of that. On the map, you can see two nature reserves, the green ones, and between them you can see a rather long distance with some barriers like roads, a railroad, but also construction and buildings. Now, ecological corridors are not more than a natural zone that connects populations of species. It consists of large or smaller stepping stones, which are just natural areas where these species look for feeding, resting, hiding, or even reproducing on their way between the two nature reserves. Now, what can this mean for the greening of school grounds? On the map you can see the school ground, which could be one of these stepping stones, but of course only when they use the right elements for the right species. Let's take a closer look at the beneficiaries of ecological corridors. Which species can benefit? Species that are sensitive to fragmentation, otherwise they won't make use of the ecological corridor. Species that are part of policy programs, because we need policy support to create them, and species that use specific habitat, otherwise they won't find enough feeding possibilities in the ecological corridor. For instance, in our surroundings, lots of amphibians are allocated to these ecological corridors. Finally, we found more than 200 species. We selected them and we allocated them to 16 groups. For instance, a tree frog would be allocated to the group of species that use ponds. Here you can see how we grouped these species into 16 eco-profiles. Eco-profiles, which are groups of species which inhabit and use the same biotopes, for instance, woodland, water elements, or heathland. These eco-profiles were used to make a map for Limburg, which indicates where possible ecological corridors can be made between the right biotopes. Now, this map is used by the Provincial Nature Centre and other nature organizations to give advice in area-specific projects, but also for the greening of school grounds. That brings us back to the third situation I mentioned before. The school was located near some natural biotopes, but also close to a blue line on the map. And that blue line indicates that there is a possible ecological corridor for species that need water elements, like crested newt. If this school takes that into account when making or greening the school ground, they can be that stepping stone that's needed for this ecological corridor. Let me end this presentation with some examples of greening of school grounds which support specific species in Limburg. First one was a school that wanted to green in favor of the stag beetle. Stag beetle is the biggest beetle species in Flanders and it's protected on European level. It's a species of ecological corridor type 10, the eco-profile we mentioned before, which groups animals of open woodlands. This animal needs dead wood and enough light and warmth in the woodland, open spaces, southern-oriented slopes, etc. In the picture you can see how the school ground was used to create breeding ground for this endangered species, and in that way it was an ecological stepping stone. The second example regards the little owl, an owl species that is especially connected to semi-open agricultural or park-like landscapes, where this owl species finds old rows of trees, hollow trees, pollard willows, wooded banks, and short vegetation. Even old standard fruit trees are very suitable. In this case, the school created some of these elements to attract this little owl species. Last example is in favor of the alpine newt. The perfect biotope of this alpine newt consists of a pond with ruffled herbs and an extensively mowed grassland, because in this grassland the alpine newts can find insects to feed on. And that is what this school created on their school ground. Apart from the benefits for this beautiful amphibian, pupils can now enjoy the tranquility of the pond for conversation, playing, and learning. Let me end this presentation by mentioning that taking biodiversity into account when greening of a school ground is really helpful for species. But not only for species, also pupils will benefit from the created natural spots, so it's a real win-win.